BlackAnthropy show produced by No Static Radio here in Cleveland, Ohio. Our mission is to shine a black light on people, nonprofit organizations, for-profit entities, and entrepreneurs who are impacting the life of individuals, families, and the community by providing knowledge, resources, opportunities, and inspiration. And this morning, we have someone who has experienced all of these in her individual capacity and has determined to expand that to helping others. Her name is Miss Sheri West. She is the founder and executive director of True West Homes here in Cleveland. And joining us is Ayl Bridges, local entrepreneur and my incognito mentor who keeps me up to date on so many different things. He's very knowledgeable on a lot of things, so I've asked him to join us with this discussion today. So, Ms. Sheri, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And so tell us, what is True West Homes and why you started that organization?
True West Homes is my I started it because of the inspiration that I had when I became homeless back in 2009, I believe it was. But let me back up a little bit. When I was younger, I always wanted to help people, but I just didn't know what avenue I was going to take until I became homeless. And so when I did become homeless, I had went to a shelter and I saw individuals there who were just like me, who did not, things happened in their lives where they had became homeless. And so while I was there, my eyes were open because I had a stigma, like a lot of people, about homeless people being, alcoholics and drug addicts and shifters and didn't want to work, but that was not the case. So while I was there, I just kept, praying and, knowing things were going to get better for me. But then when it was time for me to exit the homeless shelter, I found it hard for me to find something affordable. And so all of a sudden, an epiphany came. I said, you know what? I want to help people. This is what I feel my purpose is, to help people so they won't have to, endure the challenges that I did in trying to find something affordable. And that's when I said to myself, I said, you know what? This is what I want to do to help individuals when they exit the homeless shelters so they can be able to have access to affordable housing.
And so at True West, what do you do? So you started it, and then like your mission, your vision, you have a mission for it is to help others create stable housing. Because we'll come back to your experience. That's something that I want to talk about a little later is, the experience that you had, because that is something that people can really learn from what your experience was. But talk about your mission, because why did you make that your mission? Why did you have the vision for True West Homes that you do?
Well, it was my desire. My desire and passion to help people who are socially, economically, disadvantaged, and I wanted to create housing stability for individuals, because once they do, find their housing and everything, something may happen in their life. Some type of crisis may come up where they need help. A lot of homeless people, they have a lot of problems. They need help, so we want to be there to give them a hand up. Not a hand out, just a hand up, because everybody needs help every now and then. So that's why I wanted to create True West Homes, so I can help individuals remain in their home. That's what we want. We want to get them out of their shelter, because the shelters are full to capacity. Everybody knows that. And it's not making room for someone else who needs to go into the shelter. So we want to get them out of there. And we also want to help youth that are aging out of foster care, because when they age out, they become homeless as well. So we want to help not only individuals exiting the homeless shelters, but youth aging out of foster care as well. We want them to remain stable in their home so they won't end up back in the homeless shelter.
Okay, so you talked about two things there. Youth aging out of foster care. Most of us don't even really realize that what that means. I don't fully understand what it means. I know I don't. And so, what does it mean? Because you would think that if they're in foster care, well, they're, are they're with a family or something like that, and they'll be taken care of. What happens when they, and at what age? And I would imagine it varies definitely by state, probably by city and location. What happens at what age that makes them become homeless?
Well, I think they are emancipated at 24. I think they up the age to 24 now.
Mm-hmm.
So when they age out, it's at 24. So when they come out, they have no direction. They don't know, what to do. So they really don't have anywhere to go. Some of them, they don't have family members, that'll take them in. So they're really out here alone. And there are a lot of transitional housing that's out there for them, but still, that's far and in between. So when they come out, like I was saying, they just don't have anywhere to go, no directions or anything like that. So they become homeless. It's like 1,000 children, foster children become, like 1,000 a year become homeless within a year. 1,000 come out of foster care.
And that adds on to what's already out there.
Right. And then on top of that, 1 out of 4 of those become homeless within 4 years of being emancipated. Right. So that's the statistics that I know.
Now, before we came on the air, you were saying you and I were discussing different organizations that provide housing, and the distinction you made is you provide permanent housing.
Yes.
So there's transient housing and then permanent housing, and explain the difference between the two.
Well, to me, transitional housing is like we were talking about when youth age out of foster care. They will end up in a transitional housing. There are organizations out here that do have transitional housing for them to go into until they can find something permanent. But True West Home want to provide permanent housing because we want them to have their own space. So when they're finished with transitional housing and they're looking for something permanent, then they would end up probably calling True West Home because we want to be able to we want them to have access to permanent housing. We don't want them to be congregated with other individuals, especially what's been happening with COVID. It's a health hazard, and so individuals they are, really concerned about their health, and they do want their own space. Everybody wants their own space. They don't want to be living with other people.
And so then, what's your process if you get a youth that has aged out? What do you do to help them try to provide permanent housing?
Okay, for right now, our goal is to be able to have an affordable community housing program. But since we have limited funds right now, we are not able to do that. That's in the planning stages right now.
Okay.
But that is our goal. But right now, I didn't want to just wait around until we got the housing. I wanted to do something right now. So what I did was I started the Housing Stability Support Program.
Okay.
So when
it's HOPE. What is
Housing Stability
What is it? Support
it's
homes.
Program.
Right. The acronym is HOMES.
Right. So once they're in transitional housing, once they find permanent housing, and I provide them resources if they need to find permanent housing. I do kind of provide resources so they can talk to somebody about that. But when they do find permanent housing, that's where True West Home steps in because if they're going through any type of crisis situation where they need help, we step in to help them. They fill out request form, and once they do that, we help them in that capacity. But you do have to be referred by a caseworker because of our limited funds right now. Because we are a new organization and we're trying to get grants and things like that, but we don't have it right now. So we just you have to be referred by a caseworker to be able to get help.
Okay.
But also So when they fill out the request form, they may need help, with food, gift card, gas card, bus pass. We also help them with financial assistance, like if they partial payment of their rent, security deposit, application fees. They might need a car tow. They might need minor car repair. Things like that. Because we want to meet them where they are. We want to be present and wherever they are going through right now to help where we can to make a difference in their lives.
Okay, because that's part of the services that you provide. You provide like three major types of services: transportation, assistance with transportation, crisis prevention, and community resources. So your transportation, you help with bus passes,
gas cards, yes,
car registration,
they need a car registration,
car tow, and the minor repairs. And then the crisis prevention. Talk about the crisis prevention. What are you seeing with, or what have you seen with people experiencing homelessness and/or youth aging out of the foster care system that you said, I need a crisis prevention service? True West should have a crisis prevention service. What crisis are people experiencing in large numbers, or at least significant numbers?
Well, my services is part of the crisis prevention program, because a lot of requests that I am getting is for food, gift cards.
So that's a big one. Food.
That's a big one. Another one is the gas, so they can get
transportation.
To work.
Yeah, the food costs so much.
Yeah,
you can't make. You can't decide between those two. You gotta have the two basic living expenses.
Right, and we don't want them to have to choose.
Right.
Putting food on the table, or having to pay their rent. Just say pay the rent or put food on the table or get to work or whatever like that. We don't want them to have to make that choice. So that's why we step in to help them with these services.
I've never seen this before. You all assist people with birth certificates.
If they need
funds to get the birth certificates.
Yes.
And then you all help finance the ID background.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Al shares a lot of news and information with me every day, and I'm glad he does, because I've gotten myself where I'm engaged in a lot of different things, especially trying to build this show to tell these stories, and I don't have the time. I wouldn't take the time to go sift this stuff out. So I appreciate when Al sends me this, and these are the two big national issues that are going on in this country. Is this food and housing issue and problem that we have. And I'm going to ask you, Al, to chime in real quick, because in the last it's been sporadic, but now with this unending war, it appears, or this extended war, I should say, with Ukraine and Russia and the U.S. providing support, there are so many people saying, when you add up the dollars that have been spent, this billion or trillions, this could have paid for how much housing, how much food for people. Can you talk about that, since you read so much important news that is impacting people every day, rather than these massive, issues that are kind of esoteric to people?
Well, first off, thank you for having me as a guest on your show this morning, and it's an honor to sit here with a true advocate.
Yes.
More so to your question about the funding of the Ukraine war by the United States and what those dollars could be used for. See, a couple of things that let me explain. When we, meaning the United States, addresses assistance in war, or if we're in a conflict, let's say the United States versus Russia, I hope that never happens, but it's always over geopolitical economic reasons.
Yes.
And that's what you're taught.
And what does that mean, Al?
Well, most wars are fought over geography.
Mm-hmm.
They're fought over politics, meaning...
And what's geography?
Well, geography might mean a warm weather port, such as when it's wintertime technically almost in Russia now. And if you're in the Russian Navy, those vessels have to get out of port because they'll be frozen in the Baltic Sea.
Mm-hmm.
So they need warm water ports, such as in Central America and or the Middle East. So that's geography. So the United States wants to have a footprint in the Middle East. so we can control those ports. So we want to have a footprint in Central America or even the Caribbean, so the Russians cannot port. So when you have these ships out floating in the middle of the ocean, they can't even get logistical support. So that's geography. Or we want to have a landmass, such as a country, to where we can base the Air Force or even the Navy or even the Army. That's geography. Politics will fund somebody to overthrow a government. Because let's say that this individual, may be a man or a woman, is not supportive of the United States. Classic example was Marcos in the Philippines. We helped depose him. Then we put in Corazino Aquino as the president. We instantly sent the hospital ship Comfort there to show that we supported her. That's the politics. Economics, basically, you need our money to do what? To develop farms or schools or whatever. So we give money. In essence, we really don't get anything in return.
Yeah.
We don't. And
well, what do you mean we? Because some people do. The multinational, international corporations, they get something, and that's what I'm getting at. Is so when they are benefiting, then like it causes smaller organizations like True West a demand, a need, because those resources are directed there versus taking care of the people here in the U.S. All of the people.
Well, the defense industry does.
Yes.
The Bechtels, the whoever, whatever company, I'm going to mention names. They benefit, and so do the downstream companies who provide, let's say, the screws, the wires, go on tow missiles or whatever to make airplanes. When it comes to, we as a country have to make a decision. Do we take care of home first, or do we take care of somebody across the globe first? You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Now, we could also, use the current budget discussion, and a certain party, the Republicans, said no more money to Ukraine because that was not put in the extension. And I don't want to go in depth because I really want to answer your housing question, your issue here. This country has operated under a CR, that's a continuing resolution. For the last 12 to 14 years, there has not been a budget agreement signed. And a continuing resolution, if you know anything about the United States Code under Title 18 and 15, you can bump up on a CR, continuing resolution, anywhere from 15 to 30% of what the last year's CR annual budget was. So in essence, what we have now, because we don't have true, a good, happy environment between Republicans and Democrats, the budget just is kicked down the road. The can keep getting kicked down the road. So when it comes to housing, yes, it affects. We're just going to use $80 billion. That was the access up to about $92 billion now. $92 billion of federal funds have went to support the Ukraine war. Now, depending on who you want to listen to and read, the Ukrainians are winning or the Russians are winning. Somebody has to be losing. And I'm not trying to take anything away from the so-called freedom of the Ukrainians, because Ukraine used to be part of Russia. Okay, and the Russians really just want that landmass back because, again, maybe the listeners aren't aware, the majority of the wheat that's consumed in this country and across the world comes from Ukraine.
Right.
Also, the oil pipeline dumps into Ukraine. There's a big port in Ukraine. The Russians want it back primarily, number one, for the port, because it is kind of sort of a warm port, but from a geographical perspective, it's right next door to Poland. And Poland is a NATO member, so then if the Russians did step foot
What's NATO?
The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, you're testing me on this goes back to Navy War College days. It goes, NATO is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and it's comprised of the majority of European countries. And it used to be a waiting period to join, but certain countries sort of jerry-rigged the membership. I'm not going to mention the United States because I am an American. It used to be like a 5 to 10 year waiting period. You have to have something offered So now countries, even Sweden joined. And Sweden usually is that neutral country,
Yeah.
you know, where you can, hills are alive with the sound of music.
Mm-hmm.
But they're in now, and they have expedited membership. So it's more of an alliance, just in case the Russians do decide to invade.
Right.
So the United States and all the other NATO countries will come to their rescue. But going back to the 85 billion, should part of that been set aside for housing issues, housing instability? Sure. You have to be inhumane to say no.
Mhm.
It should have. Now, if you know anything how the government works, the government they can print up money.
Yeah, they print it. Yeah.
They print it. And not trying to sound bad or terrible, they can print up as much money as they want and pass it out.
Mm-hmm.
They can give it to HUD.
Say like the Rockefellers, when he wanted people to like him, he went and stood on the street and passed out a dime.
Yeah.
He did, didn't he?
He did. Well, the odd thing about this, and when you talk about housing instability, most of us are young enough to remember. If you go back to the Great Depression, and that was during Wilson and more so Roosevelt's time frame.
19.
Yeah.
19.
There was no fences around the White House, and Roosevelt looked out the window, and he saw some of his so-called friends sleeping on the White House line. That's a true story. And he said, we got to do something. Now, HUD wasn't created during Roosevelt's time, but that's when Social Security came about, because a lot of people lost everything. When you talk about housing instability, and more so in today's context, and I'm going to go back and make it today, when Reagan was president, that's when it really blossomed. It exploded. I'm not blaming him in totality. But why are Americans homeless? Now, some people choose that. And you can't, if Sam or Mary makes a choice to be homeless, they're homeless. If you stop to really think about it, this country, we profess to be the richest, most wealthiest nation in the world. But we have people sleeping up and down Superior, and I don't mean physically finding, standing in line to get into a shelter every day. But we have vacant homes throughout, I'm just isolated here to Cleveland. And those homes are either torn down or sold to developers.
I want to stop you because we're going to get to that next, and I want Sheri to go first on that. And so, now one thing I do want to say, this is the BlackAnthropy radio show where we shine a black light on people, nonprofit organizations, for-profit entities, and entrepreneurs who are impacting our community by providing knowledge, resources, opportunities, and inspiration. And what Ayl just did is what is really missing in a lot of debates and conversations. People talk about the periphery of stuff. When this war first started, and really before they even started, because I watch news and listen to news like you, that's the first thing they talked about. And I've watched like finance and followed the stock market and economics since I was 15, 16, 12, 13, 14 years old. And the people that I listen to, that I've learned to really pay attention, and I shouldn't even say that, to decipher the information that is being told. If you don't start with history, then I kind of give short shrift to what you're saying. So for you to march back in history and talk about geopolitics so that people can really understand these are all of the things that are really impacting, whether it's food insecurity, whether it's housing insecurity, whether it's education insecurity. You've got to go back and look at the history of this and understand what NATO is, how the U.S. wants to position itself to have missiles pointed at, Russia. And like they're saying, what if Russia had an alliance with Mexico and did the same thing? America would be up in arms. So But the bigger point is understanding history. You've got to understand history and where these things come from. So when people just jump out there, it's not enough to just say, should they fund housing? Should it be more housing? Understanding why there's not. So, as an expert in this industry, now one thing I really like to bring out on BlackAnthropy is, Sheri, you might be an expert in housing, but I'm an expert. Listeners, individuals, families, you are an expert in your housing. How do I use the information available to say what kind of housing I want to have? As an expert in this industry, someone who has been impacted by it, learned from it, let's talk about why the government doesn't own what Al said. These vacant homes, you can drive up and down Cleveland, the various neighborhoods adjacent to Cleveland, the various cities and suburbs adjacent to Cleveland. And you can do this in probably any state, a lot of states. And you see these vacant housing. What is your perspective? What are your thoughts on who should own this and how these vacant houses can be used to fill that gap that you're trying to service, that you do service?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I can say that to me it's just all about money and greed. Because you see, like I was saying, you see all these investors coming in here, buying up these properties, making luxury affordable house, a luxury apartment high rise, which are not that are so high. The rent is so high that we can't afford. It's not for us. We can't afford the rent. I don't understand why they can't come in here, build up these properties, but make them affordable for individuals. To me, it's just all about greed and power. That's what I see. I don't know. I would love for them. I would love for True West Homes. This is what our planning stages is, to have these houses that are boarded up. Why are you demolishing these houses when they can be probably repaired, fixed up? The ones that are boarded up, fixed up, repaired, and have the individuals that are homeless. They have a lot of skills. Have them come in and help fix up these properties, and then once they're fixed up or whatever, then they can be able to move in these homes. That's what True West Home. That's what our goal is to do. If, once we get the funding that we need to come in to get all these properties that are boarded.
So it would be an overwhelming task for private industry and/or the government to take over all of these vacant houses, fix them up, and then the oversight that would be needed to do that. What's your thoughts on what the government role in that should be? Yeah, some property that is vacant or whatever the case is, the government should, apportion more. What do you think government's role should be in ensuring that we do not have the housing crisis that we do, that investors do not come in, buy up the property, and make it unaffordable?
What they need to do is have them come in and stop going by market rent, which is market rent to me is still high. Have them come in, get these investors to portion part of these homes out to make it affordable. To me, I think income based.
Mm-hmm.
Go according to your income.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have someone right now who's living in one of those apartment buildings that's income based, but you don't have a lot of those around. So if the government would come in and step in and say, we're going to portion a part of these houses to be income based houses, go according to your rent instead of market rent. And that's another thing too that True West Homes would like to do. Our goal is when we do be able to have these houses that we want to make it, income based, make it mixed income, whatever. We want to try to help as many people as we can. So mixed income based. That's what's in our planning stages.
Okay, and this question came up because Al and Sheri were discussing this before we came on the air. So, Al, would you please talk about government ownership versus private investment ownership and interests?
It's a good question. I'm going to answer your question. And first, I agree with everything that Sheri did say. And if my memory serves me correctly, HUD was made a cabinet level.
What's HUD?
Housing Urban Development.
U.S.
U.S. It was made a cabinet level position in 1965. And if I recall correctly, Casper Weinberger was the first secretary of HUD during it. But it's interesting what she said or discussed. About 4, 5, 6 months ago at the most, the Western Reserve Land Bank did a complete survey of the city of Cleveland to identify what the vacant properties were, what the empty lots were.
I sat in on that city council meeting, they talked about it, yes.
But nobody can get a copy of the survey.
Yeah. Oh, it's coming. That's what they said.
Right. Yeah, it's just like Perry Mason never lost a case on TV. But nobody can get a copy of the survey. When you talk about the government owning something, and I understand the role of government is there for the people, by the people, but government's interesting, and I'm not trying to pick on city council here, at the local level, which controls the housing. Because once a person becomes delinquent in their taxes and they are pushed out of their home or put out of their home, or a home becomes vacant, somebody walks away or whatever, the government does own that property, but they create these subsidiary organizations such as land banks to do their responsibility for them. Yes, those homes should become available to the average Mr. and Mrs. citizen, and more so for those who are struggling with housing insecurity. We often hear the term market rate. That's what you will always hear in any city council meeting. We're going to build this 90-story apartment building or whatever. A developer, and I'm not picking on developers, but a developer says, I'm going to do this. Government gives them tax abatement. That's another discussion in itself. And all of a sudden, these apartments pop up at $1,600, $1,800 a month, $2,000 a month. And if I'm working, making the new minimum wage of $15 an hour, there's no way that I can afford the $1,800 a month rent payment. Or you hear local government, well, we're going to build homes on this empty lot. We're going to build $250,000 homes, which are market rate construction. A person making $15 an hour will not qualify for a mortgage.
Right.
They won't. One term I would like to hear is community rate. What can this community truly afford? Now, if you know anything about housing, not thousands of people are not coming to Cleveland, but thousands of people are leaving Cleveland.
Right.
If you're looking for a new home or an apartment, that means you're moving from building X to another location, home A to home B. What happens to that empty home I just left? It sits. Or we can do the land bank thing, if I may. You have all these properties. Let the developers come in. City council can come up with $12 million to pay to buy Shaker Square, but you can't come up with $12 million to rehab homes.
Right.
I'm a firm believer in sustainability. She mentioned, Sheri, mentioned income base. That's not for her. That's code speak for Section 8. A lot of new high rises. They say, oh, we have we're going to have senior living here. We're going to have rent fixed or whatever people. And it might be one apartment for both categories. Knowing good and damn well, HUD for public housing, CMHA, is not going to come up with the 80% to put me in a $1,800 a month apartment. They're not going to do it. So, in essence, let's all stop playing that game right now. I would like to see our local government concentrate on addressing the housing instability in neighborhoods and also do the sustainability programs in neighborhoods. Cleveland, when I say it's getting older, it's by population, by age. You don't have a lot of super millennials moving to Cleveland. because the positions are not here.
Right.
They're driving by Cleveland. They're driving by Canton. They're stopping in Columbus because that's where the money, that's where the jobs are.
Right.
Cincinnati's the next entry point. Until we reach that point, we're always going to struggle with housing instability in the city of Cleveland. East Cleveland's a classic example. It's classic. You know, if you go back even 15, maybe 20 years at the most, that was a dream spot to live in. I say it somewhat facetiously, they should turn East Cleveland over to the Metro Park.
Yeah, they seem to be able to do everything.
Hello.
Yeah,
you know,
golf courses.
Make a third of it a golf course, a third of it a nature park, another third of housing. But let's be candid with each other in this song. It addresses what Sheri mentioned. You know why they won't turn it over? East Cleveland has the direct furthest east transportation line to downtown. You can ride the Rapid all the way from the airport, far west side, to East Cleveland. And technically, you don't have to get off. You don't have to transfer Public Square. East Cleveland will be the next boom city. Because, again, let's go back, maybe a month. You see the new efforts and the development that the Western Reserve Land Bank is doing on a corner. But those aren't community rate price homes or townhouses. They're going to be market rate. And I'm not making fun of UH, Cleveland Clinic, or Metro, but more so UH and Cleveland Clinic. As long as you have a transportation line, and I'm not sorry, as long as you have a transportation line, white folks gonna live there. Now, all of us on this platform happen to be black, and I'm presuming, we grew up riding our bike in the street. With no little white lines with some guy riding a little bike. We know how to ride a bike in the street. One of the telltale signs was maybe 10, 12 years ago, when somebody passed an ordinance and they painted bike lanes all the way from God knows where, all the way out to the far southeast side. That's a telltale sign. We getting ready to be displaced. The other thing, and I'll stop here, there's a bill before the Ohio Senate, an Ohio House, put it that way, about property tax, flat property tax for seniors. It's a great idea, because what you do, if you don't flat rate seniors' taxes, you're taxing them out of their
Right.
house paid for. I can't keep increasing the taxes on me to where I can't afford it.
You know, one thing I'd like to talk. Go ahead, Sheri.
I just want to itinerate what the gentleman to the right, Al, said about. I want to just say, when I had said income based, I was not talking about the projects income based. I was talking about.
What people make, and just base it on that, right?
I'm not talking about them being in the project.
And I don't think Al is saying that. Al is saying that that's what they're gonna twist it into. That's what is right. That's what he's saying. Income based, and they're gonna find a way to twist it into that. So that's what he's saying. And what I was gonna get into is one thing I would really like to talk about on this show, because the vision for this show is in what are we leaving for other people to view and hear and really understand what's going on. That's why I say you're an expert. Most people, all I know is I need a house. All I know is there's people living in a homeless shelter. Most people don't have that knowledge that you have about living in a homeless shelter, going through a foreclosure process, what's affordable, what's income based. A lot of people don't have all of that now. I know my situation, and that's why I say most people are experts in their life. And so one thing I really like to drill in on this show is terms, right? Because people hear terms, they don't understand, and they keep going. So you're really missing the message or what's the information being conveyed when you really don't understand the terms. And then you can come up with your own definition, though, once I've heard someone like you explain, once I've had Al explain. One thing I'd like for you to talk about is the word affordable, because that's the thing that True West Homes does, is help people provide affordable housing. Talk about what does affordable mean to you and to True West Homes.
Affordable means to me where I'm able to stay somewhere where I can afford to pay my rent, because
And not just your rent, your rent and your bills.
in my bills, that too. But some place where I don't have to worry about the rent going up every year. Go according to my income, because right now a lot of people are getting minimum wage. They have to work like 2, 3, 4 jobs just to be able to pay their rent. But if they're in a situation like that, just affordable means going by your income. What are you able to afford to pay? Right now, where I live at, every year the rent is going up. So they're basically pricing us out. So in a few years, I might end up back in the homeless shelter because I'm not going to be able to afford it. So True West Home, we want to avoid that.
Right.
You know, we want to help people so they can be stable, not be stressed out about whether or not next year their rent go up, then they have to leave.
Now, one thing I want you to talk about, and you kind of just briefly touched on it, but talk about your experience, right, in 2009. And that's why I say you're an expert, because you took your experience and learned from it, built on it, and you're expanding to understand to be able to provide these services to people. Because you know, okay, affordable, if the person is struggling with rent, they're going to be struggling with these other things too. So talk about the experience of what happens if you go through foreclosure. Because most people just think, the bank just take your house or whatever. What happens, and then we'll talk about the shelter next, because these are important things for people to hear, to be able to relate, to say they understand what you're saying.
Well, what happened was, it's not like the bank just took my house just like that. It happened because of what I was going through, the choices that I made, really. Because what happened was, when I was homeless, before I became homeless, I didn't know I was going to become homeless. I was a practical person, okay? I always had a roof over my head. I always had food on the table. I always had a job. I was married with children. But then what happened was, I also was having problems in my marriage. And when my husband, when it came to the point where he finally left, I was devastated. I was devastated because I believed in marriage. And that's when everything went downhill. I had owned a home. I had owned a business where I was taking care of mentally ill in my home. I became depressed, but at the time, I didn't even know I was depressed. I didn't want to talk to nobody. I didn't want to be around anybody. The bills started coming in. I didn't care. I would just put the bill aside, because I was just how distraught I was. And then it came the time when they wrote me a letter saying, well, your house is foreclosed on, because of course I wasn't, doing anything with the rent, paying the rent. So that's what happened. That's how I fell into that category of being homeless. They finally sent me a letter, you have to be out of the house. So then, hey, I ended up being homeless from that point on. So it's not, like I said, it's not just because the mortgage people, just put me out. No, it's because of the choices that I made. It was because of me, the choices that I made. That's why I try to tell everybody, make the right choices in your life. So when I went, I was couch hopping from people to people, friends that I knew. But then eventually I knew I had to do something. I had to get myself out of this situation because I didn't want to live like this anymore, couch hopping. So I ended up in the shelter. So when I was in that shelter, it was a very structured shelter. I'm glad I went to the one I went to. I had a job. I was able to still pay my car insurance and my phone bill. But I'm a very independent person, so I just knew I had to do something to get myself. So I just stayed the course. I prayed all the time. I had faith in my higher power. I prayed and said, eventually I know I'm gonna get out of this situation. I just got to stay the course. So I just did what I had to do. So when I was in the shelter, they had a lot of things there for individuals to help them, help them with like finding a job or finding some place to live. They had spiritual classes that you can go to. They had a program called the Zakai, I think it's Zakaya, some kind of program they had. I forgot the name of it, but they helped you when you did find a place. They still helped you with your rent. So that was a helpful for me. So I'm just letting people know that that's what I went through when I was home.
And that's why I say you're an expert, because that's who you would want help from. Again, when we talk, and I can pick any social, economic, political issue, and the problem that Black people experience when we go to the doctor, they don't hear us. They want to treat something else. They don't believe us. They don't completely diagnose us. But when you go to a Black doctor, it's probably like, okay, I may not know anything about this, but let me look into this. And that's what I'm saying when I call you an expert. Because people almost want to connect with somebody they feel understand what I'm saying. And that's how we get into this situation where we were talking about just a minute ago with government ownership of property versus investors. So yeah, the investor is going to make it sound good to you why you should buy this property, why you should move in this place. But you're doing something completely different. I want to make sure that you're here permanently, that you have stability in your life. And so when I say an expert, that's what I mean, is people being able to connect with someone like you that have experienced this. You went through, like you say, and one reason I didn't mind asking you about this is because you have your story right on your website, basically everything that you just said. And that is important for people to read and understand that, okay, this person isn't judging me and they're just here to help me and they're trying to get me in the best situation that they can. And your website is truewesthomes.org. twhomes.org. And your story is right there on your website, which is one thing that I really like. Now, talk about the experience of living in a shelter, right? And what are you seeing with people coming in and out of the shelter? People using it as a way to say, like you did, I still work, I have my car. Now I only have my cell phone and my car note and insurance to pay. Explain how that helped you, and even the resources, the classes and stuff they had there to help you, and how people take advantage of that to, get to the other side.
Well, while I was in the shelter, when I first went there, it was an eye opener to me because I seen individuals there that were just like me, that was going through some type of, crisis in their life. They didn't want to be there no more than I did. They didn't wake up one morning. I didn't wake up one morning and say, I want to be homeless or anything like that. But it was something that happened in their lives. So while I was there, they had a lot of opportunities for you to get involved with a lot of programs that they had. Financial literacy, trying to get you talking about your credit score. Getting your credit score up. Spiritual classes they had, which is I'm glad they did have the spiritual classes because I am a spiritual. Well, we all are spiritual individuals, so that helped me stay on course. With believing in having faith in my higher power. They had programs for they had outings for us to go to, just to relieve the stress, being in the shelter, and they had individuals there that they were taking advantage of all of these programs that they had, and with me having my job, that helped me a lot because I was able to save money, so that when I did find my place, at least I have my security deposit.
Right.
But I knew I had to keep that job because I definitely wanted to get out of that shelter. I wanted to have my own house. I wanted to get back to my normal, home and have my own space and things like that. But a lot of people in there, like I was saying, some people, they choose to be homeless, but there was a lot of them in there that did not want to be in there, and they was also trying to get out as well.
And it's good to hear that the shelter, again, you're an expert in this, being unhoused issue, because like you say, you start out thinking it's something people look down on you as, but it's really a way for you to leave all of that stress and stuff behind and get that path forward. Like you say, save your money and do these things to move forward. And then, like Al said, some people prefer to do that. It's like a lot of stuff I listen to now. People are saying people should do this, this, and this. And it's like there are so many people worn down by the system. Like what you're saying, the stress that you had, you were going through just complete mental anguish and aggravation, and it started being talked about, but we weren't talking about mental illness and all of that stuff at that point. And so what are your comments, Al?
I just have a quick question for Sheri. At the shelter, did you have to leave every day and go back and stand in line, or did you have a permanent place at the shelter as long as you wanted?
Yes, I had a permanent place. I did not have to leave. And the reason why I say I'm glad is it was very structured. They allowed me to go to work, and then come back. I still had my bed and everything. But there are some shelters out there. I went to one shelter, and they wanted you to be in their program. So if I'm in their program, how am I going to go to work? So I said I knew I didn't want to be there. So I just kept looking until I found the one, that would let me be able to work. And that's the one that I went to.
That's why I put these terms down there, because this is important for people to understand. I didn't know that. I wouldn't have known that shelters, vary like that, and you have to be in a program versus, so helping people to understand if they're on hard times, especially right now, that a shelter is an option for you to get yourself together. What else were you going to say, Al?
Well, and you don't have to mention any particular entity. See, one of the things that still surprises me across this country is it used to be the most important or significant entity in the Black community was the Black church. But we don't have churches doing anything to address housing insecurity. And I'm going to make this real quick. When I was in Washington, D.C., I was sent to a meeting as a Navy officer because that's when the housing issue exploded. D.C. was one of the worst. Went to Metropolitan Baptist Church, one of the biggest Black churches in D.C. And there were individuals sleeping on the stairs of the church. So you had to step over the people.
Well, y'all did. The pastor don't go in the back.
I wrote the Metro there. So, but you had to step over. You had to knock on the door because there was a security guard. He had to open the door to be sure you weren't one of them. They called them homeless then. And what was astounding is there were several pastors there and some government officials, local and federal, talking about what are we going to do with these people. And I'm be candid, the majority of the homeless population in D.C. is Black because it was the chocolate city. Then there were some Europeans. And I suggested that there's a Metro representative there. I said, well, why can't we use a couple of the Metro stations after they shut down and let them sleep there? I said, we'll supply all the cots and blankets that you need. And they opened up 2 of the Metro stops on 2 different lines and let the homeless sleep there. But what I'm finding, or what I see in Cleveland, and she is the expert.
Yeah, she's an expert.
Yeah,
she don't think that. Yeah, you lived it. I mean, lived it and did something, learned from it, and then created something to help others experiencing the same thing.
Well, and I really respect and appreciate your program. Do you receive any type of financial assistance or material assistance from some of the churches in and around Cleveland?
No, I do not. What I'm doing, I am basically donating my own money for this program because that's how much I believe in. Mm-hmm. We are planning on, it's in the process of us trying to get grants, and for these corporations and foundations to help us. I applied for one, they did not give it to us, and I just can't understand why all of these nonprofits that are out here. Been out here for years. They have millions of dollars, but these foundations and corporations keep giving them money. Why don't they give grassroots organizations like True West Home some of that money so we can, prove ourselves? That's what
That's
I can't
reason.
understand. Because if we're not doing what we're supposed to do with the money, then you'll know, well, we know not to give them any money anymore, but at least give us a chance.
Well, that's one big reason, again, why SHOP started BlackAnthropy. And these are going to be the final comments for this segment today, is because of my awareness that organizations like yours, grassroots organizations, nonprofit organizations providing public service that are 1 to 5, 10 years old, people give the money to the big organizations. And then when they give it to them, they get pay increases and all these other things. And then the people that are out there actually doing the work day to day, hour by hour, all of these same organizations are, inundated, overwhelmed with paperwork, trying to request some funding that people give to these bigger organizations. And so that's one big thing that I want BlackAnthropy, that's part of my long-term planning, is to be able to bring awareness to nonprofit organizations so that people can give directly to organizations such as yours, and whether it's monetary, whether it is personal service. Right now, I know you have on your website, you have a need for some very important volunteer positions, secretary, program director, workshop coordinator, grant writer, and fundraiser. So as we close out, tell people how they can give, how they can support True West Homes, where they can find you, what's your physical address, location, what's your website, what's your social media.
Our site that we're working out of right now is 1541 East 191st Street, Suite 245. The phone number is 216-314-2973. Our email is truewesthomes@gmail.com. Our website is twhomes.org. You can go to our website. You can make donations there, financial donations. We're also looking for gas cards, food gift cards, bus passes. You can donate those too. You can send them to the physical address. We also need, like Ms. Easter was saying, volunteers to come in to help True West Homes with our operation. And I think that's about it you guys said.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Can I have enough time to say one thing?
Sure.
I would like to leave the listeners that are listening today. Please don't prejudge homeless people. True West Homes would love to dispel the stigma and break the stereotype behind homelessness, because a lot of people feel that homeless people are drug addicts, alcoholics, shiftless, don't want to work, and that is not the case. I'm proof of that, because I was none of that, but I still became homeless. People become homeless because of situations that have happened in their lives. They could be domestic violence, maybe they lost their job, maybe the landlord went up on their rent. It's a host of things why people become homeless. So I would just like for everybody to please don't prejudge homeless people.
All right, and on that, that's going to be the end for this segment of BlackAnthropy. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much, Sheri.
And thank you for inviting me, Ms. Easter.
I'm so glad you came, shared all of this knowledge, information, and you are definitely an inspiration for a lot of people who may find themselves currently in this situation, or in the future in a similar situation. And thank you, Al, for bringing a lot of broad context to the conversation.
Thank you for having me.
And we're going to take about a 5-minute break, and I will return back with Al. We're going to talk about some kind of big picture issues that are in the local news here in Cleveland and national, and they extend out nationally as well. Thank you very much for listening to the first hour of BlackAnthropy.
mean, Miss East Side and I do it.
Oh,
No,
like I said,
Call these two people. Call these two people.
How did we ever lose our
but I know what you're saying. Because
If you're around somebody, you kind of see it. Like if you go home like every 4 months, before you just stand right up and see you grab it.
and it's not even she doing that. She just her. It's like wow. It's just like wow.
I think we can probably meet her in the hallway. Well, good luck, Marie.
Thank
All right,
you.
good luck,
Thank you.
Marie.
Thank
Nice
you.
seeing you. I will be here Monday, Marie.
Okay.
Yeah, I got a guy. He couldn't make it today, and so he asked can he do Monday.
Okay.
It's a holiday, so I told him
Okay.
Is this yours?